All right, it says connecting. I don't know if it's connecting or connected. That's odd. Let me just double check to make sure I've got bandwidth here. Yeah, should be fine. All right. Hey, folks, welcome. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. And we're trying something new here on Substack now that we opened it up to all content creators on Substack. That's exciting news. And I thought tonight we'd talk about a topic rather sedate, not mundane, but sedate. And specifically, that topic is South Africa obsessed with race. Well, the short answer is no, South Africa is not obsessed with race any more than America is. But of course, the powers that be and those on social media, the legacy media, the politicians are in fact obsessed with race. Of course, race is an artificial construction. We're all Homo sapiens, some more than others. Some of us have Neanderthal DNA, but we're all Homo sapiens, and we can intermix with other Homo sapiens. Doesn't matter what they look like, what their skin pigmentation is, their origin, their location on the planet. As long as people are capable of reproducing, two people can get together and reproduce. This race construct is a 19th century European justification for empire, which is being used today by white supremacists, but mostly by black supremacists in the United States and South Africa in particular, who use it as a cudgel to attack others for privilege, for power, for access. Look no further than the BLM movement, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, so are South Africans obsessed with race? My experience with South Africans, black, white, and brown, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, all of whom I've known and know in South Africa, is that no, none of them are obsessed with race. This is not something that even occupies much of their time at all, much consideration. However, everywhere you go, it's thrown in your face. The legacy media constantly runs stories trying to promote racism, and organizations ostensibly devoted to combating this sort of thing, well, some of them do exactly the opposite. Case in point, the South African Human Rights Commission, which I call the captured South African Human Rights Commission, because they seem obsessed with, demonically obsessed with going after people who are minorities in South Africa. Yet very little effort put into going after everyone who's accused of racism in South Africa. And quite frankly, racism isn't a crime. It shouldn't be a crime. It's a socially unacceptable form of behavior. And in the normal world, in a healthy society, we ostracize, we ignore the people who behave in that fashion unless and until they try to take action for or against one group of people. So, welcome to everybody who finds this on Substack tonight. It's something new. You can live stream on Substack, and I'm giving it a shot for the first time. So tonight, this goes out to anybody who can find it, and then it's saved as a draft, and I have to publish it after the fact. So we'll see how that goes. Now, I'm broadcasting on my mobile, and I forgot to charge it, so I'm down about 32%. The intent wasn't to go very long on this, but just give it a try tonight and see how it goes. So I hope that you find this interesting. But my point back to, is South Africa obsessed with race? Again, my answer is no. I've known Tswana, I've known Zulu, I've known Sotho, I've known Afrikaners, Portuguese South Africans, German South Africans, some Anglophone South Africans, colored South Africans, and almost none of these people I've ever met or interacted with have been openly racist or give me any indication that they are racist, that they discriminate against people based solely on their skin color, their pigmentation, or their orientation. I've just not seen it. Now, am I living in a world of rose-colored glasses? Well, let me put my reading glasses on. No, they're not rose-tinted, although with the reflection from the microphone, they might appear as such. No, it's not a rose-tinted world. The reality is that most people simply aren't. It's just an excuse. It's no different than religion. You know, people die in the name of faith all the time, all over the world, involved in wars of conflict prompted by those who use religion as a cudgel, as a political tool. A perfect example of that is what happened in the Balkans. I go back to Bosnia, where prior to Yugoslavia falling apart in the early 1990s, 2 out of 3 marriages in the past decade, 15, 20 years, in Sarajevo had been inter-ethnic, so to speak, between Bosniaks, the term applied to secular Muslims, and Croats and Serbs, who all lived in Sarajevo. And in Sarajevo, these people mixed frequently, and there were no problems for the most part. They got along fine. They got married. They raised their kids. Those who were practicing Muslims went to mosque. Very few of them. Most of them were secular. The Catholic Croats would go to Mass, and the Orthodox would go to, to their church, and people got along fine. But then politicians used religion as a cudgel to divide Bosnians and to divide Yugoslavs. There was an ethnic component to it, absolutely. But there's also a religious component to it, using faith as a reason to divide people. And why did they do this? Why did the Alija Izetbegoviches, why did the Franz Tuschmans, why did the Slobodan Miloseviches and the, who's the other guy there, Radovan Karadzic, why did they behave in this fashion? Well, because of self-aggrandizement and craving political power. And sometimes self-enrichment, but certainly the first two. They became famous and powerful because of an ethnicity, the use of ethnicity and or religion, both of them powerful weapons, sending people into battle to murder, to kill each other, pogroms, to wipe out whole groups of people based on their faith. It's a sad, ridiculous state of human affairs, and it continues to this very day. In Ukraine, the grifter-in-chief Volodymyr Zelensky has used faith as a way to divide Ukrainians and separate ethnic Russians from Ukrainian brothers and sisters by banning the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, by banning Russian in official usage in the schools. Why would you do that? Why? Kievan Rus is the founding state of Russia. It's beyond counterproductive. But we see it all over. We see it in South Africa. Why in the world does the ANC, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the Mkhonto weSizwe Party, consistently use race to divide people? Why does the press consistently look for instances of so-called racism and then run off without reporting adequately on it? What is that all about? The Pretoria High School for Girls incident that occurred in the past 6-8 months. White students accused of being racist from a WhatsApp group. Screenshots shared. All the girls who were in the group punished, removed from their positions as prefects, a very prestigious position of responsibility and leadership in a school. These girls were removed from these positions without a hearing, without a trial, without even an accusation or charge, just an allegation by the media, which, as it turned out, was completely false. There was zero merit to this allegation. Zero. These girls were dragged to them, their lives destroyed, suspended. Their futures taken from them. And the charge was led by Panyazi Lesufa, the premier of Gauteng province and ANC apparatchik, race hustler, who propagated a false racist narrative against these girls in school. Why? They were demonized and ostracized by their own classmates because they were called racist, because people have been programmed that when someone's called racist, it automatically means they are racist, and therefore you must ostracize them and attack them. Their own classmates, neighbors, and even other teachers. The high school principal, demonized, suspended, removed from her position because these girls are racist. Only they weren't racist. They committed no such offense. None whatsoever. The offense was actually committed by the black students who set them up, who were caught on video that was later surfaced, talking about how they were going to set up white students to get them kicked out of school before the year was over. They were going to get even with them for a transgression that never occurred. Yet the Department of Education in Gauteng province continues its crusade against these girls and against the principal, even though an independent commission comprised of non-white adjudicators determined that there was no merit to it. In fact, that the racism was committed by the black students. Who raises children to behave in such a fashion that you would target others based on your skin color? Whether you're white, you're brown, or you're black, it's morally reprehensible. And quite frankly, it's disgusting. But the story hasn't ended. The Pretoria High School for Girls saga continues. These girls are forever marred by an allegation that was untrue to achieve a political ends, regardless of the consequences of the lives of innocents. And it goes on all the time. We see it in cancel culture. And we absolutely see it in cancel culture of people falsely accused of being racist. It just takes one allegation, one lie, and people run with it. And why is that? Well, while South Africans may not be obsessed with race, and that's my position, I'm sticking to it based on my personal experience over the past 3 decades. While they may not be obsessed with race, by and large, some are, they certainly are influenced by the perception of racism and the label of racism especially minority South Africans, wanting to avoid being called a racist, and therefore they'll step out of the way. It reminds me of the United Kingdom, where the police cowards were afraid of being called racist, so they didn't take seriously the grooming of young girls and the horrific sexual slavery they were subjected to because the police sat back and allowed it to happen. Police going to the home of these groomers, where an 11-year-old girl was intoxicated, and asking her if she was okay, and then leaving, saying that the 11-year-old girl could consent to the gangbangs that she was being subjected to. The police failed these girls. And South Africa's society is failing South Africans, much like parts of American society. But this charge, as always, is led, as I said, by the media, the legacy media, always looking for a racist story to propagate nonsense. Social media, full of paid trolls and vile, evil people. And politicians. And why do they do this? Just more nonsense today, listening to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jasmine Crockett, and the lunacy these people perpetuate, their lies, their nonsense that goes on. Well, it is sad. It is sad. If you believe in faith, then we're all God's children. If you don't believe in faith, we're all created equal. Some fall into circumstances more equal than others, but at the end of the day, you come in the same way and you go out the same way. At some point, your clock runs out. You should treat others as best you can while your clock is ticking, and make the most of your experience on this planet, in this plane of existence. And there's no sense in being a nasty, evil person. But some people just can't help themselves. They use this concept of race. It's fascinating. The South African Human Rights Commission was very slow. It took days and days and days, 10 if I recall correctly, before they began to even mention they would investigate the situation of Nobbs and Kesey on the South Air flight from Durban to Cape Town, in which she said vile, repulsive things and physically assaulted colored flight attendants on at least 3 occasions that we saw on video. Who knows how many more times she might have done it, but we know 3 times she physically assaulted those flight attendants, throwing a drink in the woman's face, then grabbing a woman by the back of the neck, and then assaulting her by pushing her. Yeah, different women, different instances. And then the vile race-tinged language, which was meant to denigrate these women because they're colored and not black. It took the South African Human Rights Commission a full 10 days. Yet barely 10 seconds after the fake news story broke on Ronaldo Gross, accusing him of vile racism in what was essentially an educational video from 14 years ago, when he wasn't in politics, just a private citizen, it took them barely 5 seconds, 10 seconds, to report that they were investigating that and they were filing a case against him. Now, I'm embellishing. It took more than that. But the point is they jumped on the story. And as a consequence, Ronaldo Gross is spending a fortune to defend himself over spurious, bogus, trumped-up charges by a corrupt organization. Is Nobbs and Kesey, an SABC employee, spending lots of money defending herself right now? I don't know. I'm not saying she should or shouldn't. What I'm saying is that where's the equity in this? What about the case of Evan Etzebeth, falsely accused of starting a fight and calling a colored person a racial slur? Totally fabricated. This was in the build-up to the 2019 World Cup. Remember that? Remember that? South African Human Rights Commission all over that one, except when it was over and it was proven that the person who committed the offense was the colored person who tried to start a fight with Evan Etzebeth. Where's the South African Human Rights Commission filing charges in a case against that person? Non-existent. Graham Smith was pillared and treated vile for years, accused of being a racist. South African cricket. Only have a panel of non-white judges review the case and determine quite clearly that he committed no racism. He's guilty of no sin. Why is it that there was no rehabilitation of Graham Smith or the Proteas by the South African Human Rights Commission? Shall I go on? Endless cases of this nonsense. Endless cases of this nonsense. South Africa is not a free society. You're not allowed to say what you want to say. So why are there consequences for people who call for the murder of white South Africans, or who openly admit in interviews when they're asked if they're calling for the murder of white South Africans, admitting, well, not just yet, to quote Julius Malema. Yeah, interesting that, isn't it? But the case about whether people are obsessed with race, the people I've just talked about are politicians, the media, and social media. As I said at the outset of this, those are the people who are obsessed with race. Those are the ones who churn levers of racial discord in South Africa. They are. the instances of black and white South Africans helping each other, let's go back to the PPE scandal. PPE period during the lockdown, the early stage of lockdown, when South Africans who had the means took food and water and helped the poor South Africans, mostly black, but not exclusively, helped them out, only to be harassed by the South African police service and by politicians who confiscated the food, water, resources, and kept it for themselves or sold it. Generosity. Most South Africans are Christians. Christians are people who consider charity and their brothers and sisters and helping them. And that's what I see when I'm in South Africa. I see it all the time. You see commercial farmers, white commercial farmers, helping non-traditional, new, aspiring black farmers enter the marketplace, even though they're competitors. Isn't that something? Yeah. So it's just really sad to see. But it'll never end until South Africans take agency for who they are and put a stop to it. You have to end the woke virus. You have to demonize the evil people who divide you based on skin pigmentation. You do. It's as simple as that. You don't engage with them. You ostracize them. You socially distance from them. And hopefully they get the message. If they don't, then they won't reform. They won't repent. There's nothing you can do about it. But if they do get the message, well, then maybe they can be forgiven, come back into the fold of humanity. But I'll tell you, it's really sad. Race relations in this country were never better before Barack Hussein Obama became president. Never better. Not in my lifetime. I was born in the 1960s. Never saw race relations better. Now, I did come from an artificial world for a long time because I served in the military, which is, in theory, a meritocracy. In practice, it's one driven by racial quotas, but illegal, and they've gotten away with it. But anyway, but by and large, it is a meritocracy. One driven by meritocracy. And racism was never something I experienced in the military. Observing it, certainly not participating in it, or being a victim of it. Never saw that in the military. Now, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. We saw the neo-Nazi episode of Fort Bragg in the early 1990s that had to be investigated by Criminal Investigation Division and Military Police Investigations, and a huge clearinghouse of getting rid of those idiots. So it exists. These sort of things exist everywhere. But kind of, that is where the rose-colored glasses came on. I was in the military, and I didn't really see this stuff up close and personal. Just didn't. And growing up in society, I did see some of this, but it got better and better over time. By the 1980s, life was pretty good. I constantly hear this nonsense about how black Americans were discriminated against and never on television shows and never in movies. Yet every time I watch a show from the 60s, the 70s on television, they're full of black characters. I remember Friends was criticized because none of the primary actors were black. Oh, so it's implausible that a group of upscale yuppies living in Manhattan would only have white friends? It's not implausible. It's in fact very plausible. It's probably more common than we realize. But Mannix, the first regular appearing main actor, was on that show, a black woman. The list goes on and on. The Mod Squad, the Rookies, all these shows. And now it's completely the opposite. The majority of the population is completely whitewashed. I just spent, let's just say Hollywood's part of the racist drive too. Creating artificial realities that just don't reflect life. So, for instance, I just watched A Discovery of Witches. Wow. I never knew that all of London in 1590 was black. Did you know that? If you watch Discovery of Witches, you'd be forgiven for seeing that's the case because all the actors are black. If you're going to make even fiction be historically accurate, that's a stretch, to say the least. It's as bad as our commercial cinematica, where white males are non-existent, almost completely gone, wiped out of history. Anyway, but I digress. We're talking about racism-obsessed South Africa. And again, I stand by my thesis that South Africans are not race-obsessed. South Africa, because of its social media environment, because of its legacy media, and because of politicians, is race-obsessed. There's nary a day going by when black supremacist South African politicians don't try to bait people into a racist incident. And when a true racist-inspired incident occurs, if it happens to a minority, there's nary a mention of it, nary a peep. The Nobbs and Kesey situation was an exception, but that's because about 60 people on the flight recorded what she did. And they couldn't help but that be reported. They couldn't cover that up. But when the owner of a resort in Northwest Province is called out because people are breaking the rules, and he politely asked them to stop. He's white. A thug gang of black South Africans attack him with knives, stabbing him multiple times, including the back, in critically life-threatening condition. Now, at a minimum, one should ask the question, is that racially motivated? After all, everyone assaulted him was black, and he's white. Maybe it's not. But the question wasn't even raised by the South African Human Rights Commission. That occurred on December 16th of 2024. That was 1 month ago. The South African Human Rights Commission cannot be bothered. The South African Human Rights Commission has yet to open a case in the torture and terroristic murder of Brendan Horner in 2020. They've yet to open a case into the savage butchery and murder of Edward Neumeister with a panga in KwaZulu-Natal in 2020. They've yet to open a case into the racially motivated linked, most likely murder of a 4-month pregnant Indian woman on the Ayub farm in 2020. But within 5 minutes, they opened a case against Ronaldo Khus. And the smear merchants in the media began their lies and attacks against Ramon Kabanak within moments after they realized that he was working for John Steenhuisen, even though he'd been doing it for days, weeks. It's almost as if they have an army of paid trolls that sit around and dream these things up, try to go after people. That's reality. Anyway, folks, I don't know if you're able to chat here, if there's a chat function available. It looks like there is, but we're on Substack, and just a handful of people here, and I appreciate you tuning in. It's the first time I've gone live on Substack because it just opened up to just those of us in the lower caste have now been allowed to live stream on Substack. So I thought I'd give it a shot tonight and talk about a topic I think is apropos. So anyway, you feel free, I don't know if there's comments, how this works, but you're welcome to leave a comment behind. Thanks to the handful of people that joined. Hopefully others will find it after the fact and leave their comments behind. But I'll continue to publish here for free for the foreseeable future. And I'll also do videos on here if it's of interest. Meantime, over on my original channel, the one that was censored by YouTube, oh, you're listening. Okay, cool. At Real Chris Wyatt on YouTube. At the top of the hour, 30 minutes from now, I'll be doing a Say Goodbye to Joe segment, talking about Joe Biden, his last week of destruction of America and the world. So we're going to say goodbye to Joe. That's coming up in 30 minutes on YouTube at Real Chris Wyatt. So if you're around, you want to check it out, you're welcome to join me there. Thanks a lot and appreciate it. Thanks for listening in here, and we'll see how it goes. According to Substack directions, when I end this, I have to go back into the app or into the website, and then this is saved as a draft. I have to publish it so that others can see it. At least that's what it says. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. What's that? Hang on a second. Is that the link to my... I don't know what that link is. That's okay. It came up. I guess that's a link to that other one. So thank you for that. Have a good night, folks. Appreciate it. Take care. God bless.